thank you all for joining us with Rebels with a Heart, the rules of leadership. Today's topic and theme will actually be about humanizing the employer brand, which I think is a very relevant topic to all that's happening. And as I mentioned, we have some amazing panelists today joining us, and we're going to go around and allow them to introduce themselves now, and we'll jump into the conversation. So Hilary, I know you're excited. I'm going to pass it right over to you. And please just share with our audience a little bit about yourself and your life and your work. Thanks for being here.
Wonderful. So again, Hilary Aslaksen with Danaher. I lead global talent acquisition for the organization. And for those of you who don't know us, we're a global technology and innovation company. Really 20 different operating companies across life sciences, diagnostics, water quality, and environmental sciences. So really spreading the wealth around how we can help realize life's potential by solutions in these industries. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia, and the mother of 2 girls and the wife of a husband. So living a crazy life right now since we've all been together for the last 16 months, very much all the time. But really looking forward from a work perspective to talk about this topic. Danaher is on its journey with our employer branding effort, and we've seen it evolve even just over the last 12 months. So really excited to see how we move this forward.
Awesome. Thanks, Hilary. I'm looking forward to asking some questions on managing teenagers too. So that'll be fun. So Bryan, I'm going to go over to your way. Welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Well, thanks a lot, Derek. So I'm Bryan Adams. I'm not a retired Canadian rock star, but I am the founder and CEO of one of the leading employer brand agencies called Ph.Creative. So we operate globally, and we're specially calibrated to work with global brands with complex talent audiences. And one of the reasons we started the company actually was to bring more sort of humanity to organizations and enhance employee experience. So today's topic is close to my heart. Really looking forward to diving in and learning as much as I will be contributing. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Bryan. Amazing. And Suni, we're going to go over to you across the world, joining us from Italy. Welcome.
Well, thank you. I hope you can hear me clearly, and just let me know if I have Wi-Fi access issues. Raise your hand. Lobo. I lead HR for a company called Navis. We're a global software maritime company based in 24 countries. I've lived personally in multiple countries, 8 countries globally in my career, and I've just enjoyed that journey. And I was saying to the team earlier on, the one thing that always strikes me about having conversations like this or living and working anywhere in the world is that we have more commonalities than we have differences as a group of people. So, we're all connected and wired to be connected as a humankind. And I just love having conversations like this with my fellow peers in the industry, but also looking forward to having the participants join us along the way. So
absolutely. Perfect. Thanks, Suni. That's a good segue. Just a reminder. So Derek Lundsten, President and CEO of LifeGuides. I'm the host of Rebels, and we are all about connecting people and sharing their stories. So the idea of people going through a challenge, being able to connect with someone who's been through that same experience so that we can create healthier communities, healthier companies, and healthy, happier people. So again, thank you to all of our panelists for joining us today. And we're going to jump in. I think the first question I have is, when you think about humanizing an employer brand, what does that just mean to you? I mean, that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of people. So what does it mean to each of you personally? And any one of you can take that question first.
I would tell you from my perspective, it's really helping candidates connect to our company, to understand who we're all about, how we operate, what it's like to work with our company, and how we do the things we do. There's a lot of ways to get information, but finding that connection to say, hey, would this be the right place for me, is really what we're trying to do and the stories that we tell. That's
great. Suni or Bryan?
Well, from my perspective, sorry, Bryan, I hope I was not talking over you. It's such a multifaceted question because, our employer brand is so much about what our employees feel and experience within the organization, but it's also about what other people experience of us, when they look at our organization and look inside it. And for us at Navis, we've been really focused on creating this sense of belonging. Do you feel like when you come to work every day, this is the place that you belong, that you can bring your whole self to work and you feel really connected? And it's that intangible feeling of feeling connected, but also the tangible feeling of feeling like you belong, right? And we've had a lot of conversation of the last year and a half or so around what promotes belonging for individuals and how they can bring their whole selves to work. So for me, it is all these, various components that come to bear when you talk about employee branding.
Awesome.
Yeah, I guess I'd just add to that. I think in terms of employer branding, the job of branding in general really is to sort of paint an archetypical human picture of a corporate entity. At the end of the day, that's what the job of branding is. And from an employer branding perspective, what we found is there's 3 derivative buckets. There's purpose, impact, and belonging that we were just touching on. So it's that meld of those 3 derivative ingredients that can really add up to something that speaks to people, whether they're inside or outside of your organization. And to me, employer branding is about the reputation you have as an employer and the expectations that you set for the employee experience.
Yeah, I love the answers, all 3, and I think that's kind of a nice dovetail into. So going further around the concept of belonging, right? We've been through a really interesting year where we've literally been separated. What, as leaders and as organizations, what have you done or what are you doing to foster that sense of belonging where we've literally been apart, right? And obviously, there's lots of different ways that companies are doing it, but how are each of you doing that right now? And then how might that be shifting as you reevaluate business and life post-pandemic?
So from my experience, I can share 2 experiences actually. One from a sort of how we advise our clients and what we're seeing happening from that landscape. And really over the last 12 to 18 months, it's been about reminding people why they're there. So reigniting their sense of belonging, as well as purpose and impact, which play a really sort of complementary role in that. And there's some fantastic organizations out there who have just neglected to remind their people why they do it. And the personal example, which sort of gives a good sort of human veneer to that, is not 9 months ago, I was having a really challenging time. From a leadership perspective, I was struggling, and I just wasn't motivated at all. And through just instinct rather than sort of any intelligence, I shared a story with my team, and my company is small. There's only 80 of us in the company. But actually the feedback I got from an element of vulnerability was remarkable. And what it reminded me is, there's never been a more socially acceptable time to be vulnerable. And for me, that is an accelerant towards humanizing any organization, because what we do then is we conjure empathy. And if we can show compassion and vulnerability, for me, that was a moment of learning. A little light went on for me personally, and I've seen in the press, I've seen organizations communicate from a position of strength, and I've seen organizations communicate from a position of weakness. And interestingly, there's been more and more cases of organizations communicating from a position of weakness, but gaining more empathy and being more human because they are transparent, authentic, and vulnerable, just showing that they actually care about their people. And I think that's happened over the last 18 months like never before. And I think it's going to be one of the silver linings that come out of a post-COVID world.
I'm going to come back to a number of things you said, Bryan, because there was a lot in there, but I want to pass it over to our other guests here for your thoughts. Anything you've shared. Yeah, go ahead, Suni.
We talked a little bit about your purpose, impact, and belonging continuum, right, Bryan? And the way we thought about it, and let me tell you, we didn't think about this purposefully in the first month that we had to all, scramble to move to remote work. But then we really took the time out to think about what we wanted to do from an employee experience perspective, now that we were all on a level playing field. Everyone was home and everyone was working remotely, which was almost an opportunity for us to have people on that level playing field. So the three kind of pivots we focused on were career, community, and cause. And cause talks a little bit to your purpose, continuum, as you called it earlier, Bryan. But we really thought about everything that we were doing for our employees under those three banners. And career was really important for us to focus on because people were, evaluating where they were when they had suddenly moved to remote work. They had a lot to deal with and contend with at home. So how could we support people in their career journey, being in that position, so to speak, right? The second was community. Everyone wanted to come together and we felt a need to connect with each other because of what was going on for us globally. We did a number of initiatives in that space. And cause really in the end, I think brought us all together. And the example that, really brings home to bear for me is what happened with India recently. We have a large employee population in Chennai. Actually, our highest employee base is in Chennai. And when India experienced just a colossal, disaster when it came to the COVID response from a country perspective, we really put our arms around our employees and we partnered with organizations locally to help folks. We just ran a vaccination drive where we vaccinated about 150 employees and we have about 250. So we're really going through all of the different things we can do to connect with our employees there. And make sure we're giving back not only to them, but also to our community in India. So that was one example. But I think, from what's happened to us over the last year and a half, there's been so much opportunity. Often we focus on, this is actually going to be a bad cycle for us and how we're going to go through it. And we found by focusing on the opportunity it's created for us to connect with our employees, to have regular conversations with them. We meet with them every 6 weeks. So we do a global all hands every 6 weeks. At 8 a.m. PST, we broadcasted globally in all of our 24 different countries. And the CEO and I are almost always the people that are on the call, and then we invite other people in. And it's been a game changer for us to be able to connect unilaterally with everyone, and everyone has the opportunity to ask questions. And we will continue that, to the vein of, what's going to continue after this? We will continue that because we found that so powerful to connect directly with our employee base. So some of the things we've done personally at Navis.
Thank you for sharing those stories as well, Cindy. We'll come back. Hilary, I'm going to pass it to you as well. I have so many things we can explore here, so keep going.
Yeah, at Danaher, we've been pretty lucky. All 4 of our platforms were actively involved in the COVID solutions. We're creating vaccines and the systems to get them out and the tools to use to distribute. So purpose was already sort of at play. People felt a real connection to being part of the solution. But from a leadership perspective, all of a sudden, all of your teams had very different concerns and very different worries and how they were going to get things done, and family members that they were no longer seeing, and a couple of kids at home and a couple of dogs, and how they were going to manage it all. So really I think the most critical thing we did was up the communication. Leaders were talking to each one of their associates on a weekly basis. We were seeing leadership come out and communicate a lot about COVID and where we stood as a society and across our different regions and how we were helping. And I think that gave people a lot of comfort. But we also dedicated 2 weeks out of every year, two conversations out of every month to continued development. Life isn't stopping. We may not be going to the stores anymore. We may not be doing the same sort of travel we've all been doing, but we're still moving forward and your career is still moving forward. And that also gave people a lot of comfort. So I do think communication was probably the most critical thing over the last couple of months because it brought us all together. We still had our community, even though we weren't together. And within Danaher, that was a really big difference because we're a big go to Gemba company. We like to go to where the work is done and understand what's happening, and we all come together to solution. So we started doing it on Teams and Miro and all these new tools that have come our way. So I do think you just, you double down and you find ways to make sure you're communicating effectively.
Yeah, well said, Hilary. I think, and just to kind of string all your stories together, I think the point of the level playing field, the communication, the openness and vulnerability, I think that's a big part. I commend Bryan, even you just taking the lead and saying that you struggled with this. I mean, I think all leaders, we're all people, right? Everyone's having their own things that we're managing at home, and our home and work lives have become very integrated and blurred, right? And the lines of those, as we talked before, our kids are around, our dogs are around, we're around the world here on this conversation. So I think that is another element that's allowed people to connect in a new way that wasn't present, and I agree will be a silver lining. The other thing that you all mentioned or alluded to that I want to kind of go into more now is around people's careers. And now we're at a point where, and we've always had this, but employees and team members have a choice, right? They have a choice of where they want to invest their time, where they want to invest their energy, with type of brands and missions and purposes they want to be associated. I believe we're about to see a huge moment of people really putting their choice into action. And as we consider this return to office conversation and how people have adjusted and all those different pieces, how are you personally preparing for that? How is your organization preparing for that? I would love to get your thoughts on how you're addressing choice when it comes to where your people want to spend their time.
There was an article recently that I read, I'm sure that you guys came across it, calling this year the year of resignation, where people are making active choices because we've had a chance to actually step back and think a little bit more about what purpose means to us and what we want out of our lives, right? And we're seeing some of that happen already. We've traditionally had a really low attrition rate, but we're seeing some movement now of folks saying, I want to spend time with my family. Yeah, I have kids going to college and I just want to spend time with them for the next 3 or 4 years and then come back in. So, acknowledging that people have all of these life situations going on and helping them through those and making sure that we have an approach of boomerang back into the organization because, we create these strong bonds at Navis and people stay for a long time has been one thing that we've really tried to think differently about. But secondly, on return to work, my pet peeve is this whole verbiage around return to work. I'm like, and Bryan, to your branding conversation, we did a lot of work around what we call it. So where we landed was a smart work model. That's where we landed. So we don't call it return to work. We don't call it return to the office. We call it smart work. And the essence of smart work is around flexibility. The essence of it is around the fact that we trust our people to be smart operators, which is one of our guiding principles for success or our values. And we trust them to make the right choice. Now, we've given folks some guidelines and some guardrails, so to speak, but we're not going to be one of those companies that are dogmatic about coming in for X amount of days or, being home for Y amount of days. Or we want our employees to make that choice. And also because we're so global, it looks very different in different parts of the world. So we're going to, we've announced our smart work model. We're training managers now just to give them the opportunity to understand every employee's position, so to speak, right? Someone might want to work from home because they want to spend time with their kids in the morning. And that might be the case in Oakland, where we have, on California, where traffic is crazy, and it's already gotten crazy. But in Flensburg, in Germany, where we have another engineering site, everyone bikes to work and it takes them 10 minutes. And they're like, but we want to come in. So I'm like, then come in, So we want to be able to give folks the flexibility to make good choices and good decisions and train managers to provide that support to their employees.
Great. I love that you brand the initiative. Hilary, I could see you wanted to chime in on this when you were talking. Bryan, I'll come back to you in just a moment, but Hilary, go ahead.
Yeah, so very similar to what's happening with Sunaina's group. We call ours future of work, not back to work. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're finding, that we've got pockets of people who can't wait to get back into the office. And so you really need to be able to expedite that where you can. But where we need to have flexibility and where we can have flexibility, we're building a simplified process to make that happen. We're helping managers understand how that would work. We're making sure that we're thinking about nuts to bolts, what that impact would be from a tax perspective, for example, and all these different things you need to be thinking through, because as simple as it seems, it's really not simple. When you sort of change the way this operates. So we're doing the same things. We're evaluating where we can. We're not mandating anything at this point. And, we still have regions where it isn't possible for folks to go back. So, it's going to be an evolution, I believe.
Thank you. All right. Yeah. Go ahead, Bryan. I was going to say, you have the benefit of both your company and you work with a number of other partners directly on this. So I'd love to see what you're hearing and seeing, both directly and indirectly.
Yeah, so from our company's perspective, the majority of our team is in England, and all the kids go back to school on September the 1st. So we're having a back to school day if you want to come back into the office on September the 1st. But we've already evolved now into a flexible remote organization. So we see it as sort of campus community facility, but actually we're employing common sense for people to choose whether, how to optimize their own employee experience. And our job is to support and facilitate that. But the interesting thing over the last 12 months is just from our own perspective is we've been able to hire the best talent, not the best talent in Liverpool or the best talent in London or the best talent in San Diego or New York. So we now, we've almost bend our boats. We've started hiring people all over the world from different places where we haven't got offices at all. So, we've fully committed. And our culture has moved on such that it's no longer the dictation of the organization. It's the mindset of the collective, from a people perspective. But what we're also seeing, which is super interesting, working with very large global organizations, is a mindset shift on retention. Not too long ago, the average tenure was 4.2 years in any one position on average. Millennials are switching jobs every 1.8 years. So, if the establishment tries to retain, then they're headed for a fall. But what's interesting already is that a trend towards just an up and out mentality in terms of, to Hilary's point, in terms of focusing now on career progression, now more than ever in a volatile world with, a lot of inconsistency and unknowns. The constant and the confidence you get from having the stability of seeing your own career progression is definitely a big factor in whether you're part of the great resignation or not. But my message to organizations who are worried about this is, look, yes, be worried for it. Yes, start to prepare for it. But you have to embrace it, because if you try and swim against the tide, you're going to lose. And if you align what is currently in the mindset of people, which is our audience, which creates the demand, then you have an opportunity to drive a high performance culture, align your employer brand with the direction of travel of your business strategy, which is the key to any successful employer brand. And you can also humanize the employee experience by listening and working and going with the flow of what your people actually want and demand. And if you look at McKinsey, who have an incredible reputation as a talent accelerant, most of the people at McKinsey, they'll last 2 to 3 years, but by an overwhelming majority, a lot of their alumni go to Google. Now it's 25 times harder to get a job at Google than it is to get into Harvard. Yeah. So McKinsey aren't worried about people leaving and going to Google. They're proud of it. And it's helped them to build a reputation as a talent accelerant. So coming full circle, if you embrace it, move with the times, that can definitely be a positive. And there's no point swimming against the tide when it comes to people moving on. But what it does say to me is, from a talent experience perspective, now's the time to invest in alumni. So you've got your candidate experience, you've got your employee experience, and you've got alumni. It's moving further down. It's following consumer trend, actually. Mm-hmm. If we invest in community and you have a great reputation of the people coming out, therein lies the big opportunity. And I think big organizations with sustainable brand over the next 5 or 10 years are already investing in that reputation and their alumni.
I completely agree with that. Go ahead, Sunaina. Go ahead.
That's what we were talking about when you talked about boomerang earlier, Bryan. You know, we are seeing a lot of that happen. In fact, funnily enough, in my team, when I joined the organization, I had an intern who, you know, was working with the HR team for about 6 months, converted her to a full-time role. And then about a year, she said, Suni, I want to travel. But she was hesitant having that conversation with me because the people around her, and she said to me, the adults around me were advising me not to tell my manager. I'm like, who are these adults? And she said, you know, it just felt like I could talk to you about it. I'm like, absolutely, you know. And when she said, I want to travel, I'm like, you should travel. You shouldn't be here. You should be traveling. And, you know, fast forward 2 years later, she's come back to join the team.
Yeah.
And that's all about, you know, it's just an example of humanizing the experience. And we do that purposefully at Navis, right? We want to be able to have them come back in and to look at the experience at Navis as being one of their best, you know, kind of career experiences, right? And there are a few companies that create that and, you know, have the brand. Actually, I was at Cisco for 9 years and Cisco has that brand in the market, creating that sense of belonging with Cisco, even when you're away from Cisco, which is awesome. You know, it's wonderful.
Yeah, I think that's the irony of the word retention, right? Is that when typically when we're looking at that, McKinsey's a perfect example. We're looking at the dollar, right? The investment that's been made, which is why we don't want to lose that investment. So we want to retain it. But the reality is these are people. They have the choice. And we want, if you create an experience, and back to that same comment, if half the market's going to be resigning, there's a tremendous opportunity to recruit and bring in more fresh talent that only amplifies the community and the brand opportunities that are built. And then to your point, Suni, you have loyalists and alumni that are out there kind of speaking the good name about the company that they were with, and then it starts to create more of that connection. So I think it's a really interesting time from this point of view. And I think there's really needs to be a shift around what is really driving this need for retention, if you will, because it goes back to that comment around employee choice. And that's really what we're going back to. And Hilary, I see your body language kind of nodding kind of in a little bit. So I'd love to pass it your way just in a moment to get your thoughts on this. But yeah, I think it's really, I mean, Bryan is spot on with what you said. If you create an experience where people want to be, you're going to continue to, people will choose to belong and recruit their friends and other talented people. So anyway, Hilary, pass it back your way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just think that it seems so simple, but that's just it. You've got to know your people and you've got to know what motivates and drives them, right? And that's what we've got to appeal to. I think retention is all about, that's in some ways sort of the easy button. We don't have to replace anything and things keep moving, but what happens is you stay stagnant and you're not bringing in those new ideas and you're not driving that diverse thinking and an ability to move and innovate your company further. So it's all, to me, really part of that big humanization picture. We've got to know who we are, who our people are, and we've got to support what is important to them, because then they do come back. The right people do come back to the organization. And Danaher, we kind of have our own language. We call it DBS. And so people get really comfortable in understanding how we work. So that feels very normal to them. So when they feel like they can attach to something, that also really helps us drive sort of our reputation. And as a big conglomerate, you know, we've spun companies off and we've acquired a lot of companies. And so we're constantly churning and burning, and it's just a real opportunity for us to make sure we're getting across, here's our value proposition, here's what's important. And that's how we grab our people internally, but then also putting those messages out externally.
Yeah. So in addition to the culture that you're all describing, that your organizations have and that you advocate, which I love, I mean, another big topic that we hear about, especially from employees, is around the idea of perks and incentives. And, you know, I think the last year has kind of changed how we look at those things because of the need to be so flexible. The need around individualization and around personalization. I mean, how do you see kind of how you look at benefits broadly or total rewards broadly shifting now as we move to a completely new model of how people look at what's offered and how they, again, back to choice. I think there's a lot in that word that needs to be considered, but this is going to confront us as leaders, I believe, of how we do this differently. That it's not okay just to have here's our benefits offering. There's a higher expectation of standard that people are now seeking. So I'd love your thoughts on that question.
So I think, you know, we've at the two ends of the spectrum, you know, the sort of free blue M&Ms at this end and doing something really meaningful to impact somebody's life at this end. I think the world has gone through a transition to really question and interrogate what matters when it comes to the strengths, the benefits, and the opportunities of the organization you work for, such that we've all been assessed, we've all been judged, and now many people are talking with their feet, you know. And I think employer brand has had to mature very quickly from storytelling to story doing. You know, actually showing up when it counts and taking action that changes people's lives. And that could be, you know, a daft example is, I don't know whether any of you watch Billions, but I remember watching the first series of that and I was like, this is awesome. You know, Damian Lewis at its best. And I was always jealous of the psychiatrist in the office. And I thought, I'm getting me one of those, you know. So we're the defenders of happiness. I hired a happiness coach. But what we did, surreptitiously, you know, we turned mental health from a negative to be ashamed of to a positive that you have to be a peak performance. Like, you know, Usain Bolt still has a coach, you know, why not have a happiness coach? And actually we did that just before COVID, and that served us really well because people felt they had a place to go and talk about and share, and, you know, and that fed into a wider conversation which helped us break down barriers and walls. And actually, in a world where we've never been so alone speaking to people through screens like this, that one little thing helped us feel more connected than ever, you know. So, and incidentally, we've still got the free gumball in the office, but it's not being used these days, you know. So it's only a strength, a benefit, and an opportunity to your people if they actually really value it and they can see you doing it with compassion and empathy for what they really need. And I think that's the secret, really. It's about good old-fashioned listening to understand and reacting on a human level.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate you sharing the LifeGuides value proposition as well, Bryan. I'll just point that out real quick for you. That's awesome. So I'll pass it back to Suni and Hilary to get their thoughts on this as well. Then I have another question I'll dig into, but go ahead.
Yeah, I think, you know, for me, the question of benefits and perks is always such a fascinating one, right? Because you can have the conversation about the free lunches and the free kombucha, as we're doing today, by the way, in the office in Oakland, because we're having our grand opening today. So we're having kombucha cakes. Just to have a party and invite everyone back in. But, you know, where does it stop? Where's the line? And what actually truly matters for individuals is the question. You know, my team and I always ask ourselves, right, when it comes to benefits and perks, you know, is it, you know, can we keep giving benefits and perks out? My husband's at Google, so, you know, I always say he comes home every evening and has a new perk, a new benefit. And I'm like, I'm never going to be able to compete with that. But what I can do is really connect with my employees, right, and the folks that work at Navis, and figure out what it is that we need. And over the last year, inclusion, diversity, and belonging became a big theme for all of our employees globally. Now, with all of the racial conversations we're having in the US and indeed globally, but also the inequity conversations we were having. So folks wanted to come together to have conversation about topics that they didn't feel they had the ability to have a conversation about before. So the employer went into a new realm of almost facilitating a social dialogue with our employees. And we felt that very strongly. And as an executive team, we said, where do we want to be? What is our position on this? But we've started various forums. You know, one forum that we've seen great success with, and, you know, people always say this is much better than a free lunch, is a diversity bridge. So everyone can come to a body, so to speak, an inclusion diversity group of people and say, I want to talk about my country, about my culture, and, you know, maybe we can have, you know, virtual food that we can all share with each other, or we can just have a conversation and a quiz about my culture. So we've had, you know, every couple of months, someone talks about what it is to be Israeli, and he's from Israel, or from another part of the world. And we have a lot of cultural diversity at Navis because we're so global. And that has been a game changer, to be able to talk about your own identity, share it with other people, and have people come and join you and be curious about what it is about you that makes you unique and what is the uniqueness that you bring to the organization. The last diversity bridge we had was about Russia. We have one employee in Russia, and we had the most attendance for that diversity bridge from any of the other diversity bridges, because people were so curious to understand about Leaf and his culture and what he found exciting while working at Navis. So that was a huge game changer, and I think had more value to our employee base than any free lunch or free kombucha could have, right? So that was one of the things, and we ran different things. We also had something called a dialogue circle, where we could talk about more socially, contentious, I would say, issues, where people could have a space, a really safe space to come and talk about what they wanted to talk about, and we seen them in different various areas. And to your point around mental health, we have the concept of mental agility versus mental health. We've called it mental agility. How do you get to the point where this becomes a game changer for you and your performance? And we've run a few workshops, and that's been really great for the company. So just some things. Benefits are always a really interesting conversation for me and gets me off on a tangent, because I'm like, I don't think the free lunch is the answer.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I would tell you that we've done a lot of similar things. We've given a lot more flexibility and options to our total benefit package. We've doubled down on the mental health and wellness piece. We all noticed we were sitting at the desk for 12 hours. What do we do to get people out? We're giving away Fitbits and things like that to get people moving again. So we were really doubling down on that. Your health matters. One of the big initiatives we also took this year was with mindfulness and helping people sort of regroup. And so that was a big initiative. But again, through our ARGs, which are associate resource groups, we've been doing a lot of those similar things, cooking classes in the evening, and ways to better connect with certain groups of individuals across the company. So it's really giving the flexibility, to your point, Derek, of what they need, what's going to make them feel whole as individuals, and providing that.
And the follow-up question to your, the Fitbit conversation, how did that go? Did they, how was that received? And did you guys do a competition?
Yes, it was received very, very well, and people took it very seriously. Teams were formed, and people were out running every day or at their desk, running and carrying on. So it was received very well, and actually people began to blog about it. It began to, become a really hot topic in some of the online or in-house online tools that we use. So it's fabulous, and we continue to do it today, and it will continue to move forward.
That's great.
I love the word choice of wholeness that you described there as well, Hilary. And all of you kind of raised this other thing, which is fascinating, is that in a year that we were apart, so to speak, physically, we really confronted in a way that's never been confronted, at least in my lifetime in business, these topics around, mental health and that topic at work, around story actioning, as you would describe it, Bryan, around DE&I, beyond just initiatives, but really embracing hard conversations. I mean, when we're doing it our team as well, we were actually just commenting on this yesterday, just the level of authentic conversation that our team is having, of wanting to understand each other better, and our backgrounds and our worldviews, and how that comes, and to understand each other and to build more trust and collaboration. But I think that seems to be something that, again, there's been so many silver linings, but that's a big one. Those ones in particular. And I kind of just pass it back, is that as we push it forward, as we look to the future, how are you seeing your internal stakeholders carrying this torch forward around mental health, specifically, or emotional health and well-being, around DE&I, around putting values into action in a new way? I mean, this is a real shift point, I believe. And to your point, Sue, you mentioned in our introduction around what makes a great place to work, right? How do we define this moving forward in our responsibility as leaders, and the platform that we can have around making change happen in the world and through business? So, not to put too much weight on your shoulders, but that's I'd love to get your thoughts on that, all three of you. Yeah.
And I'm happy to go. You know, when you said make change happen, it reminded me of a tagline that we created because we're in the maritime industry. Our tagline for our university hiring is make ship happen. So we always, you can see, Bryan, that I like branding. It's something that's very close to my
I like that one. I like that one. That's fun.
And that was created by our intern, you know, the story that I talked about earlier, who, you know, went out and traveled for a year and came back and joined the team. So she created the phrase "make ship happen," which is really taken off. But I think, you know, it would be remiss of us to think that we will go back to the way we operated prior to what the last year and a half has been for us, you know, and we really recognize what it has added just to make us a great place to work. And we want to accelerate that and leverage that. And I was saying to the team earlier on, we ran our survey to be certified as a great place to work last year in the middle of the pandemic in May, where everyone's worlds were just turned upside down. And every single person who was advising me said, don't do it. Don't do it. This is the worst time to do it. And it ended up being the best time. We had 94% of our employees say that we were a great place to work, which was, you know, at some point in its early 60s. So, you know, that shift from 60% odd in the early 60s to 94% was a huge shift. And it was not only the work that we did in the last year and a half, but it was a result of all of the work that we've been doing for the last, you know, 3 to 4 years, where we built a purposeful people and culture strategy and, you know, executed on that, right? So rather than say that we're going to do too many things, we're purposeful about what we were going to execute on every year and really communicate that to our employees and listen and drive action versus, you know, talk about it. We were big on creating action and a real experience for the employees. So, you know, what are we going to take forward? We're going to take forward everything that we have implemented this year, literally, you know, more awareness on mental health, what we call mental agility. To your point around, you know, your Fitbit challenge, Hilary, we had a challenge called the Stepathon, a global challenge, where everybody was, you know, competing against each other, and it ended up being the most important event of last year. So we've relaunched it. It really brought out the camaraderie, but also the competitiveness. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, you know, people were going crazy. Yeah. We loved to see that. And our only criteria was, you know, you cannot be part of a team in your current team structure. You have to choose someone outside your current team structure and someone outside your region. So it really got everyone connected globally rather than just in their groups. So we will continue that. We just run a second round of the challenge, and we're going to continue that. We're really going to continue all of our work on dialogue circles and diversity bridges, because we found that has been a game changer for us. And then think about flexibility and offering folks flexibility in coming back into, you know, whatever the new normal is, right? So our smart work model, and making sure that it fits individually what people's needs are, rather than doing a blanket approach to what would fit a large group of people. We want to really customize the employee experience, to your earlier point, Stephen.
Thank you, Suni.
And I would just say that what the last 18 months has taught all of us is that empathetic leadership is critical. You know, we have people who are dealing with a lot of loss, given the COVID situation. The social unrest brought topics to the limelight that we couldn't not address. So we were having conversations and days of understanding where we were really bringing things to the table that maybe we had been brushing aside, right? And it was forcing us to be better leaders. And I think that's really at the crux of it all. You know, we have to be able to be comfortable having those conversations and addressing those needs and stepping up to the plate. So I think, you know, we did a lot of that in helping prepare our leaders for these conversations, helping address, you know, needs of the associates, and that will continue going forward. Yeah. You know, the genie's out of the bottle, and it's time just to continue that.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Kind of along the same lines and kind of continuing that thought, it was kind of the question I was going to ask, and actually came in from one of our audience members as well. You know, the last year has been so uncertain, it's required so much courage on the part of leaders, right? And to do things differently and to try different things, be willing to frankly fall on their face, that be vulnerable, as we talked about. The question that came in, and kind of along what I was going, is what are your leaders going to do to inspire employees going forward, especially given these aspects from the future of work and the whole component of being a blend and a hybrid of virtual and on-site? And I think that kind of the same thing, really, what's the courageous action that your leaders are considering, or that you as leaders are considering now as we proceed into this next half of 2021?
I think that's a really good and very timely question, you know, and if you think about it, they say true character is revealed under pressure. And there's a lot of organizations and there's a lot of leaders under pressure. So if we look for the opportunity in that situation, I think what our people are looking for is integrity around decision making. And like we said, in a volatile world of transition and uncertainty, what our people are clinging on to more than ever is certainty. So when an organization's in flux, you know, demonstration of the integrity and the core values that you talk about when times are great. You know, was it Groucho Marx said, "These are my principles, and if you don't like these, I've got others." You know, it's not about just chopping and changing. It's actually about having the grit and the determination and the conviction to stick to the vision and the integrity of your values and so on and so forth. You know, and that means, like we were saying before, if people are going to leave, they're going to leave. Accept that they're making the best decision for themselves. You know, and actually going back to the sort of point of humanizing a brand, you know, I think we'll be judged for how we treat people on the way out more than how we treat them on the way in. Our industry is fantastic at talking about candidate experience. We've got to remember as well, and I think, Derek, you were talking about, and Hilary mentioned, diversity, which I know Danaher is phenomenal at leading the way from a diversity perspective. In order to improve diversity, people have to leave. You know, the reason it takes so long to improve diversity organization isn't the conviction to change. It's just there isn't an opportunity to fill empty seats. So, you know, I think there's a number of opportunities here, but it requires not just the rhetoric of what we are going to do. Now's the time to story do, like we were saying, not just story tell. And you're going to be judged on the actions that you take. And some of those decisions are going to be tough. But you want to be on the right side of that decision making, because the world is looking. And we don't know the difference between employer brand and consumer brand. There is people making buying decisions based on how you treat your people. You know, those lines are blurred, you know, and it's shattered forever, because the spotlight has never been on employer brand more, you know. So hopefully the big silver lining is, you know, there is a demand to act with integrity and do the right thing by our people. And long may that continue. If that's what it takes for us to make those types of decisions, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Well said, Bryan. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the courage of our leaders is going to come down to, we may need to do business differently, right? And that's new for everyone and uncomfortable, but learning from each other and doing the work is where it's all going to come together, and continuing to show that integrity and make those decisions. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
You know, this phase of life, you know, expands or shrinks in proportion to the courage you have, is a phrase that always has resonated with me. And it's something that we talk about with our leaders, right? And at the start of COVID last year, everyone was so worried about their jobs and about the uncertainty. And the first thing we said is that we will not do any restructuring, or no one will lose their jobs. And, you know, we will, as an executive team, take a 25% cut in our pay, but we'll ensure that everyone else will stay whole for the entire time. And we had lots of very testing moments in the last year and a half. Where was that the right decision? You know, do we have the ability to actually make do on that decision? Never once did we say we're going to go back to our employee base and say, no, I'm so sorry. we have to have a huge restructure and cuts in our employee base, right? And it was tough. It was very tough for us. But we were very clear that that's the stance we wanted to take as an executive.
Well, you made a strong commitment. You made a commitment. You made a commitment, right? That was the whole, you committed to that path. You said, we're going to, no matter what, we're committing and we're going to figure it out. When you do that, you find the ability to be resourceful, right? I mean, that's.
We did, you know, we were a company that had a really face forward culture.
Yeah.
You know, we wanted to be with our employees. We wanted to travel to employee sites. Our professional services is just a world-class professional services team because they go to the customer. And we had to pivot and be innovative and creative around how we would service our customers in a time like this. And because we were committed as an executive team and said right off the bat that we were not going to make no one will lose their jobs. No one's salary would be cut. We would do that for ourselves, but we'd make sure that everyone else stayed whole, that everyone rallied around that conversation. And we need to treat this company as our own and think like owners and figure out creatively how we can get to our customers. There's so much creativity and innovation that came out of last. Unbelievable, you know, we loved it. And we'll still continue doing all of our services remotely, you know. We never wanted to do any services remotely, and last year showed us that we could. So, you know, we will continue that path. But, you know, being honest and also making sure that your values don't change in proportion to the decisions that you need to be making was really powerful for our employee base, I think.
Thank you for sharing that, Sunaina. I'm going to just kind of close in just a moment. I want to kind of ask a question or comment that you made, that the most certain thing we can offer right now is the acknowledgement that life and business is very uncertain. And so the question or the consideration I have for each of you is, what are you each doing either in your personal life or in your teams to help people foster that sense of grit, of resilience, of resourcefulness, of agility, of adaptability, whatever word you want to use, because that is probably going to be, besides the sense of belonging and impact and purpose that we've talked about around culture, the ability to respond quickly and intentionally for an extended period of time is going to what separates, I think, great companies in the next decade. So any thoughts on that? And that'll be our closing question for today.
So personally, I see my job as the CEO of the organization in an uncertain time to deliver consistency week in, week out, which is a heightened amount of communication, but reminding what hasn't changed. You know, steering the ship with, you know, continuity, which breeds confidence. And then from a one-to-one perspective, you know, it's about listening, supporting, and knocking down walls and getting out of people's way. You know, because I think that shows trust, and that's the difference between management and leadership, isn't it? You know, it's showing them where we need to go and then getting out of the way and, you know, supporting them rather than sort of telling them what to do. And that's on a very simple level, just in our organization, you know, that's what we're seeing. But, you know, from a client perspective, the same thing scales, you know, and it's the consistency of message and shifting gears towards a position of support. Again, with consistency, we're seeing that pay dividends time and time again, because if you could be the constant, your people will always be the variable, you know. And great communication isn't just broadcasting frequently, it's also about listening and then doing something about what you hear. You know, so I'm seeing that from a small business owner, and I'm seeing it on a large scale with our clients as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Bryan.
I would just echo that, Bryan, because I think confidence is at the core of this, right? And I think that comes through with, you know, making sure that you're continuing to develop your teams and building their confidence that they are in control in a world where nothing is in control, you know, especially over the last year. So I think that was, you know, I think that is a critical component, again, of that leadership that's needed.
I think the only thing I'd like to add is honesty and, you know, and transparency. People want, if they trust you, at the core, and they trust you will make right decisions for them as individuals. They want to be told what is actually going on. So let's not treat people like children.
Yeah.
Like children,
Right.
Actually, we don't even treat our children like that. We're more honest and transparent with our kids, right? So, my philosophy, my leadership philosophy has always been be transparent and honest. Let people know exactly what's going on, and then make sure everyone has the support systems around them to be able to leverage or deal or cope with whatever is going on. But there's no point in us not being transparent or honest with our people, because they are grown individuals, and we we all want to have an adult conversation at the end of the day.
Thank you, Suni. As always, this has been just such a wonderful conversation. I personally have learned so much from each of you, and I'm sure our audience has. And I just want to reiterate my appreciation for you all joining us today, and your time and your wisdom, and also want to acknowledge each of you just as being such phenomenal rebel leaders, and just what you're doing in your lives and with your teams to put this into action. And just know that myself and the team are here to support you in whatever way I can in your own journey and work journey. So with that, thank you for all of you joining us for Rebels. We look forward to seeing you on our next segment, and be well, everyone. Thank you.
LifeGuides, navigating life challenges together.